Let's talk about solid drawing. One of the 12 principles of animation, it is defined as the ability to render a 3D character in a 2D space. It is the secret to make our characters go from lines on the screen to being alive. In this video, I will show you the single best exercise I've found to improve your solid drawing, how to animate an accurate turnaround of any character you want.
We bring you tonight's exciting story.
Today, I'll be animating both Gwen Stacy from Into the Spider-Verse and Ako Kagari from Little Witch Academia. I'll also be using Clip Studio Paint as an animation software, but as long as your program has a timeline and an onion skin function, you are good to go. To start, I'll be collecting some references. We're especially interested in neutral expressions for the character in the typical model sheet poses, which are front view, 3/4 view, side view, and back view. You can find them by taking screenshots yourself or by using the original character sheet. By studying another artist's work, you'll not only be able to absorb a bit of their style, but understand why they synthesized the character's features like they did, and be able to feel their volume. You gotta trust me on this, but intuitively, you'll absorb knowledge which will help you draw better. I used PureRef to build me a reference board for Gwen, which you can download for free. Now to begin, it's important to have a base that tells us in which part of the rotation we are. I created a template with a sphere showing its center axis, and it takes exactly 2 seconds to go around at 24 frames per second with one drawing every 2 frames. You can download this template for free by joining our Discord server and going to the freebies channel. It includes a Clip Studio version, an Animate or Flash version, and also an image sequence with transparency in case you want to use another software. This sphere will always represent the cranium of the character. So for example, if you were animating Krunk, you could resize the entire sphere to make it fit better. So the first thing we'll do is import relevant images of these poses that you found and scale them so the cranium matches the sphere. For now, it doesn't matter if they are a bit different from each other, just make sure it is official art. Again, we're working with the front, 3/4, side and back views, since these are the extremes of the animation or the keyframes that allows us to see the limit of the volumes of the character. Once you've set them correctly, we are going to trace them. Yes, you heard me correctly. And before you think, okay, so I just trace it and then in between it, stop. If you trace and then jump into in-betweening, you will fail. This is just a first step we have to go through, but we still have to work on these drawings. On the other hand, some of you will say, nah Manu, I'm not a cheating loser. I would never trace another artist's drawing. Again, we are not tracing for funsies. If you try to eyeball the poses, you will also fail. And let me show you why. Lighting matters a lot. For example, in these 2 shots, you can see by the grooming of the hair that they are using the same exact 3D model. But because of the lighting, if you were to try and eyeball this drawing, you'd probably draw her lips and her nose way bigger on this one than on this one. We're trying to go for accuracy here. So trust me on this, you want to trace these key drawings at first. You will place the drawings in the frames that are marked in the file, or just use the axis on the sphere as the guideline for the center of the face. The line should always be in the middle of both eyes. Now, there are some cases like Ako, where they tend to draw her differently in several shots. Even the character sheets show a lot of range in her proportions. In which case, well, rip, basically. I had to eyeball it, which is the reason why I decided to animate her too. All I had to go from is this single image. Once you're done with this stage, this is where the real learning experience starts. With just these trace drawings, you'll notice that the features dance all around. This is what we describe in animation as boiling, where every frame is just a tad different, so when you play it, it just vibrates all over the place and it doesn't look very good. We need to make sure that every face feature and even the details on the clothes and the hair stay consistent throughout the rotation. For this, we will go to our very best drawing of the lot, and then we want all the other drawings to look like this one. The way to make sure of this is we will start adding ellipses to use them as a limit of at which height or length every feature should be. The first one we'll add is a straight line at the height of the eyes. Then we'll go and do other important ellipses like the tip of the nose, limit of the lips. The ellipse must be perfectly centered with a center line, so I will also add that at the center of the sphere. And also, when placing your ellipses, the limit of how far away from the center it goes also matters a lot. You have to use your side view to determine this. You can actually see the shape of the face eventually formed by these ellipses. Now, it doesn't matter how accurate you thought the reference you used was, you'll soon start noticing that heights and proportions do not match. So once you've set the most important ones, it is time to go to the front view and the side view and start modifying their features so they can match the placement and height of the 3/4 view. So this is a back and forth where you get to decide what the proportions you want to use will be. Being diligent with this step and double checking not only where the feature starts, but also how far its height goes is the key to making a successful turnaround. So feel free to add all the ellipses that you need. Remember that all the ellipses on top of the horizon, you will be seeing this side of the ellipse, and the ones below, it will be this side. We will continue with the most important views. It is valid to go back to our 3/4 view or front and side to fix things. This back and forth until all these drawings look similar is the point of this step. Then we can move on to the back view.
For this, I'll just duplicate the front drawing and flip it horizontally. Then erase everything but the outline to get the right silhouette and fill in the details.
And the 3/4 back, which is the middle point between the side view and the back view. Remember, the axis goes all the way around the sphere, even though we can't see it, and these features are still there, though we're not drawing them. It's important to take this into account so you don't end up with disappearing things. There are two types of features in the character, symmetric and asymmetric. What I mean by this is once you're done with half a rotation, things like the eyes and the body can be duplicated, flipped horizontally, and used for the other half of the rotation, since they just remain the same. But other features like her hair, we have to animate for the entirety of the 24 drawings, because it's asymmetric, meaning not two drawings will be the same. So I will separate my hair into another animation folder and keeping the face and the body into the first one. I also made Gwen's smile a little bit slanted, so her expression is not that stiff. But I do have to keep this in mind and modifying the drawings when I duplicate and flip them. Once we finish the main keyframes, it's time to go for the in-betweens. I'll turn my onion skin on, always creating an in-between that's right in the middle of two extremes. 95% of the time you'll just draw a line right between the green and the blue line, but there are some cases where once you go back and check the animation by skewing through it, which I recommend you do often, you'll notice some volumes feel off. That's when you need to use your brain to determine where the actual line will have to go. You can see this example where this line is actually closer to the green one, meaning the next pose. A lot of this exercise is just going back and forth and fixing little things, checking how it's looking and fixing again. Don't be afraid of getting your hands dirty, deleting parts and doing them again. Always use your main poses as a peg and reference from them, but realize you are not going to get every single drawing perfect from the start. The more you acknowledge what looks wrong and what looks right intuitively, your brain starts gaining the ability to portray these volumes on any view you can imagine. It's something that I cannot put in words, and I hope you can experience. I can use layer masks to hide parts of the face. For example, the features I don't want to see when I flip the drawing, because the hair bangs will cover them, but I do not want to erase them completely in case I need to reference them later. For that, we just click on the layer mask button and erase. We can always go back and paint like we were painting with the normal brush, and it will bring back that information that we masked out. Once we're happy with the drawing, we can move on to coloring. For this, I'll use the fill tool. Here are my recommended settings, and just fill in the colors into an animation folder. I will first create a blank folder with all the frames that I can keep duplicating. Remember, when using the fill tool, you can only use it in raster layers and not vector layers in Clip Studio. Most people like filling all the colors into a single folder, but I personally like separating different pieces. For example, have one folder just for the skin and another one just for the hair. This allows me to have control. For example, what if later down the line I want to add a gradient to the hair which darkens the roots, like the actual character has? Just make another animation folder and use the clip to the layer below button and paint a single frame of that hair. Then I will keep duplicating this drawing and move it around, and I can distort it using the Ctrl-T function, which is our transform tool. I do this way and not painting every frame because you'll end up with a lot of vibration in the shading, because it's impossible to match them by eyeballing it. I can also use the clip to the layer below function to clip a second brighter layer of the hair. For this I'm using blending modes like multiply for the shadows and add glow for the highlights. What if down the line I want to change the color of the skin to better match the palette? Then I can just add a correction layer and clip it to the layer below. I also like adding gradients to her eyes and a tiny little speck as an eye highlight in another animation folder, which makes her feel so much more alive. In the end, I got rid of the buck teeth. Even though the original character does have them, I thought it was calling too much attention, so I just painted a white dot on top. And this is my final result for the rotation. Now we can also add a little bit of shading with shadows. For this I will make another animation folder and just draw guidelines with a hard brush of where the lighting should be. Just like we did the rotation, I'll start with the main key drawings, and once they look well, then I will start in-betweening these lines so we can avoid any vibration. Then I just fill in with a reddish color and use the multiply blending mode and lower the opacity a bit so it mixes with the local colors. Now speaking of shading, I do want to add a little note here. This is something I explained last year in my Lightbox Expo panel, but I think it's important to touch upon, which is volume in animation doesn't come from lighting actually, it comes from the animation. And the way I'm gonna prove this to you is by just drawing a straight line on top of Akko with a multiply mode. Now if I play this animation, you'll see it actually feels like there's a shadow source covering her from some light, even though it's not following her volume at all. And we can use this to our advantage when cel shading for animation and webtoons. This is a fantastic effect which allows us to get complex shading results that look extremely professional without having to actually go in and for each frame think of how the shadow will affect the volume of the character. Now let's talk about where to find the character model sheets. The first place I recommend to look for model sheets is the Living Lines library, which has a lot of Western cartoons, and you just have to go through the options to get into the model sheets. This is an example of how to find Hogarth from the Iron Giant. And if you're into more like anime type characters, you can go to Setei Dreams, which again you just have to search for the series that you want and you will find all the production materials that you may need. I hope to see what you'll create using this knowledge, and I promise you it will take your animation and illustration a long way. So if you do this exercise, please post your results using the hashtag #MercurRotation on any platform you want. I'm in all of them, and I'll check them out. So portraying volume in 2D is not as black and white as you may think, right? But exercises like this help you master the judgment of how you should draw things and feel their volume. And if you need help getting started on how to animate in Clip Studio, make sure to check out my full guide, which is coming up next.
There was this really shitty reaction image that we saw, and we're like, what if I posted this on Twitter and said, man, I really wish this was a t-shirt, and we got everybody to retweet it, and sure enough, a day later, it was up there, but the worst thing ever. What does it mean loading?
What even is loading?